Please note, this episode is best experienced with headphones. This story touches on trauma, mental illness and religious belief. And remember, the reflections shared here are personal and interpretive. They are not offered as proof, only as a way of sitting with a difficult story. If you are watching or listening on YouTube, the image used in the thumbnail is an artistic representation inspired by Anneliese Michel, and it is not intended to be a literal depiction of her. Welcome to the Beyond Haunted UK podcast, and I thank you for listening, wherever you are. In today's episode, it is not about a haunted building, it's about a person, and about the world that she lived in. Anneliese Michel was born in 1952 in Bavaria, West Germany, a country still living in the long shadow of the Second World War. Germany in the 1960s and 70s was a nation trying to rebuild its identity. There was economic recovery, yes, but emotionally and culturally, the country was still processing collective trauma, guilt, and moral reckoning. And in many rural Catholic communities, faith was not just a personal belief. It was structure, and it shaped family life and morality. And it's how people understood suffering, shame, and responsibility. Mental health at that time was deeply stigmatised. Psychiatric care existed, but it was often poorly resourced, misunderstood, and socially avoided. To struggle mentally was in many communities to be seen as weak, or worse, morally flawed. And in deeply religious households, psychological distress could take on spiritual meaning. Anneliese grew up in a strict Catholic environment, and her faith was sincere, but it also carried heavy themes of guilt, sin, and punishment. When she began experiencing seizures as a teenager, she was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. Later came depression, hallucinations, and extreme religious fear. She began to believe she was condemned, that she was unworthy, that something dark was attached to her, and this is where belief begins to shape experience. Because when a person is suffering, the story they are given to explain that suffering matters. In a different cultural context, Anneliese might have been understood as a young woman experiencing severe mental health. And in Germany of the 1970s, particularly in a devout Catholic household, her experiences became framed in spiritual terms. Not as illness, but as possession. By the mid-1970s, Anneliese and her family believed she was possessed by demonic forces, and they sought approval from the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism. This wasn't fringe belief, and it was formally sanctioned. Over 10 months, Anneliese underwent 67 exorcism sessions. Listening to the recordings today, it's hard not to hear distress rather than something supernatural. You hear exhaustion, fear, and even pain. Medical treatment was reduced, fasting was encouraged, and her physical condition deteriorated. Anneliese died in 1976, aged just 23, and the cause of her death was malnutrition and dehydration. Later, her parents and the priests involved were convicted of negligent homicide. Not because they intended harm, but because belief left unchecked became a form of neglect. And this is where the questions deepen. Do exorcisms still exist today? Yes, they do. Are the experiences once described as possession now more commonly diagnosed as mental illness? Also yes. So what has really changed? Have we abandoned the idea of possession? Or have we simply replaced religious language with medical language to describe the same human experiences? And can we say with certainty that possession no longer exists? Or does that belief depend on the cultural framework we live within? Religion can sometimes offer comfort. It can offer meaning. But it can also shape suffering into something moral, something personal, and something that feels like punishment. Anneliese did not just suffer from illness. She suffered within a belief system that taught her that her suffering meant something about who she was. And that may be the most haunting part of her story. Not demons, not ritual, but the quiet way belief can turn pain inward. In the paranormal world, we often talk about energy, imprint, and trauma lingering in places. But sometimes the most powerful haunting happens within a person. The stories we're given, the beliefs we absorb, and the meaning we attach to our own suffering. Anneliese's story doesn't just ask us to choose between belief and medicine. It asks us to reflect on how easily fear can become explanation, and how often compassion gets lost when certainty takes over. So maybe the real question isn't whether darkness exists. Maybe it's about how we respond when someone is lost inside their own. Because sometimes what people need isn't an exorcism. It's simple understanding and care. And the safety to be unwell without being seen as broken. And if there's a lesson in this story, it's not about demons. It's about how belief shapes care, and how the way we frame suffering can either hold someone, or let them slip away. Thank you for sitting with this story. If you'd like to support Beyond Haunted UK, you can follow the podcast on Spotify and across social media. Every follow, every share, and every message helps keep these conversations going. Wherever you stand, in belief, in skepticism, or somewhere in between, thank you for listening. And remember, some hauntings aren't tied to places. They live in the spaces between fear, faith, and the human need to be understood.